It is Friday, March 18th. Let's talk PlayStation. Hello everyone, welcome back. This was one of our quieter weeks, honestly. It's been a while since we've had not too much happening, but still some things worth going over. So first up, as always, our PlayStation Plus reminder. The March games are still up. Make sure you grab them, get it done. And also for our first story, let's talk about actually, let's cover the Returnal update real quick. Still coming March 22nd, which is the Ascension update. That includes the story co-op mode, but also the Tower of Sisyphus. This is where over on the PlayStation blog and also the official PlayStation YouTube channel, we got an 18-minute walkthrough. And it looks good. Obviously, I'm very excited. It's something where it's pretty much as described. It's going to be a survival mode where as you climb the tower, it gets progressively more difficult. And just a few things that we can really note here is that there is a new boss. There is new story segments, which is always really cool to see because the story of Returnal is a bit obtuse, but hopefully we'll have more clarity and things to discover. And, well, if you have the Platinum, this is something where I would caution. We don't know just yet if there's going to be new trophies, but I would assume there is based on Housemarque's history with additional content where they add new trophies, but also you can see in this gameplay demonstration that there's a new glyph. You can catch it for a few seconds or something, and if you have the Platinum, then this is a bit of a maybe not a good thing to see considering the RNG and how you have to do so many runs to try and complete all those, but I think there's probably going to be new trophies for this, so if you have the Platinum right now, then I would prepare yourself for it not being a clean 100% on your profile anymore, but still, I am very excited. Moving on to our next story, we have another patch for Horizon, patch 1.08, so like we talked about last week, it's a weekly basis that they keep putting out these patches. Guerrilla's still doing a really good job here. It's just that there's a lot to clean up in this game. Again, open world, there's just so much that can go wrong, but this one, still no update on the graphical issues or the shimmering that people are running into, but one very good, very important fix is the trophy to retroactively update for the all machine type scanned. So if you're still playing the game or if you haven't gotten to it just yet, what's always a little bit scary is a missable trophy where it's at the very end of the game, so if you miss it, then you're kind of out of luck and have to go through the whole game all over again. But it seems like they actually nailed this, so if you did miss it, where you have to scan a machine in the last mission of the game, you should now be able to log in, or rather download the patch, start the game, and you'll be retroactively given that scan, and thus you won't have to play the whole game again. And this is true for many other data points in the game, so if people are still trying to, hunt for those and whatnot, it should start showing up after this patch. But again, probably another patch we'll see sometime next week, and maybe then they'll nail down what's going on with the shimmering. Now, probably the more interesting patch that happened this past week was for Gran Turismo 7, patch 1.07. This one, it's not really looking too good. So, as you would expect, it's a patch that's fixing many things in the game, but people noticed immediately that this patch also cut the payout ratio for many races in the game to where you're not earning as many credits as you were before. So some of these races you're now earning half the credits or even less than half of what you were earning previously, and this really goes back to what we talked about last week, where the microtransaction situation in this game is not really all that favorable. So it comes off very much like they're trying to steer you in that direction of spending money on the game, which you don't have to, and I will always recommend don't do it. But it's just now, it's making the game a lot more grindy, especially, again, when you compare it to the previous game, Gran Turismo Sport. And, a few Gran Turismo fans, and I believe over on GTplanet.com, there's been a breakdown of, the various Gran Turismo games and how some vehicles are getting more expensive in-game when it comes to the credits needed to actually purchase them. And there's also now a ratio being figured out of how long it takes to actually earn these cars legitimately. So it's just a lot of grinding. And so now it's not really a good look when we just talked about how the MTX situation in this game makes it seem like a lot of cars, and they are more expensive on average versus just Gran Turismo Sport, where you could spend $4 or $5 on a car, possibly less. And now you're lowering the credit ratio or the payout ratio for a lot of races in the game. So that wasn't good, but the thing is, this patch went out, and it wasn't even live for that long, and then the game actually went down, because the unfortunate part of Gran Turismo 7 is for a single-player game that has a lot of single-player content, it requires an online connection. And so actually the game was taken offline for a maintenance period of about, well, it was promised to be about 1 hour, but it's 9 p.m. currently on Thursday night, and again, I filmed these Thursday night to go live Friday morning, and the game is still not online. It's been like 12-something hours, and so if you want to play single-player content on Gran Turismo 7, doesn't matter if you bought it digitally or physically, you can't do it. And this is why DRM is so problematic nowadays. It really should go without saying why people don't like it, myself included. It's, you know, there's an expectation with an online game that maybe there's a maintenance period every so often. Maybe there's a problem and it goes down for longer than expected, and that's kind of, you know, it's frustrating, but people get it because it's online. Single player content, this should not be there. It should never be there. So it sucks. And right off the back of this patch where, you know, they're making it seem more grindy. I mean, it's weird because the game had so much momentum going into it and right up until launch, and then it did come out and there was so much positive reception. You know, a true to form Gran Turismo mainline game coming out so soon on a brand new PlayStation lifecycle. I mean, this really was kind of a best case scenario for this game up until the microtransactions, the new patch, and now it being offline. So all that momentum seems to be getting wiped away very quickly, which I would hope that all the, you know, very fair and justified criticism being thrown at Sony and Polyphony right now is something that they take to heart and actually learn from, but I don't know. I guess we'll see. Moving on to our next story, we've got some pretty interesting sales data to go over for Europe, where PS5 was actually outsold by Xbox Series consoles in February, which I believe this would be the first time that's happened since launch. And this is something where it's really, this report from GamesIndustry.biz is really illustrating just how, you know, bad the stock shortage has gotten here. So the report claims that for total hardware sales in Europe, they're down 44% compared to February of last year. Even Nintendo is down 14% for Switch sales compared to the same time last year. And most notably for PS5 and Series X, the stock shortage is quite real. As a result, Xbox Series consoles were sold across Europe more than PS5, and the report also mentions this is primarily due to the availability of the Xbox Series S model, which I find interesting because as far as we know, we don't actually have a proper split of how many Series S versus X consoles that Microsoft actually does sell. Microsoft doesn't put out any confirmed numbers right now, so I would be curious to know what the split really is, because I would venture a guess and say that primarily they mostly sell Series X consoles. That's still the most desirable one. It's the highest average selling price. It's just kind of goes without saying that most people want to buy that one over Series S, which, you know, Series S, at least for the current generation, I mean, it's the one where it's been the most reliable to buy on any given notice. Here in North America, for example, it's been something where I've actually spotted it in stores, and that's more anecdotal, but it's just, you can find it online pretty easily, and it stays online, or it stays in stock online for, you know, a few hours at any given moment. You can usually grab one whenever through the Xbox All Access program, and out in Europe at least, it's usually been something where you can definitely go to a store and usually find one. I mean, keep in mind for Sony, we know that their ratio is somewhere around 80-20, where the 80s favoring disc consoles. They really don't make as many digital consoles as one would think, and that's why I always recommend when a restock happens, if you're trying to buy a PS5 still, go for a disc console. It's just, the digital ones go out pretty fast. Maybe they've increased that ratio a bit, but for the most part since launch, it's been around 80-20, give or take 5%. And for Series S, I would probably put that around. Like, I'm sure Microsoft's probably a bit more even in that regard, or they've evened it out a bit more, where it's like Series S is anywhere from 30 to 35% for Series S, and then the rest is Series X. But I would be shocked, honestly, if it was any closer, or if it was a 50-50 or Series S majority. I digress, though. The point is, Europe in particular is a very strong market for PlayStation. It's something where if Sony could easily, you know, make enough of them, which is that is easier said than done, but if they could make enough of them, they should have no problem selling more PS5s. But I mean, clearly it's been a huge issue for both Microsoft and Sony, because again, they are both really struggling right now. And first quarter 2022, and it's still a problem trying to buy these things. It's still going to be quite a bit before you can comfortably walk into a store and buy a Series X or a PS5, you know, whenever you want. Moving on to game director Hideo Kojima. Recently he sent out some tweets that have sparked discussion on what's going on with his next project, if it is or is not with Sony in some way, or if there is some kind of, Sony involvement, which it seems pretty apparent that there is something going on at least. Recently he sent out this tweet where he says, "Motto has been very useful," and it's a picture of the Sony Motto, which is a kind of like a video conferencing tool, a very experimental conferencing tool that Sony has not actually released publicly as far as we know, so it's something where he got early access to it, and he's been using it to actually oversee some motion capture, which the studio in this picture appears to be the motion capture facilities for Sony Santa Monica. And really important to mention this before we move on, but Sony does actually rent that space out to other publishers and developers, so it is possible that that's what's happening here, but also seems like, or at least one could argue that Sony would not rent out the space to a developer that is not at a minimum shipping a game on PS4 and PS5, so it doesn't mean it has to be a PlayStation exclusive, or it has to have some sort of PlayStation association, but if Sony wanted to be petty, they would probably not want to rent the space out in a conflict of interest sort of thing. But anyway, there's that, and then there was another tweet where Kojima said he received flowers and a bottle of wine, thank you, and it's all in Japanese, but it's actually from Sony, both Jim Ryan and Kirichiro Yorada. So there's been a lot of speculation as to where Kojima's next game is going to go, or how many games he's doing, and we're kind of just rehashing a lot of things that we already know and we've already heard, like for example directly from Kojima basically, that there's 2 games, one big, one small, and that's been the running theory for a while, and that's why it kind of lines up with what we know from the first rumor, which was from Games Beat reporter Jeff Grubb, about how he signed a letter of intent to make an Xbox cloud-based game, and that could be the smaller one, and then the bigger project could possibly be what we saw from Norman Reedus in a very candid IGN interview where he said very briefly that, I think they're trying to sign on or negotiate a Death Stranding 2, and that's really all we know. I mean, all this is unconfirmed, but as we've said before, when those rumors initially sprang up about Xbox, there's nothing here that implies he can't do more than one project at the same time, so people keep assuming that the Xbox rumor wasn't true, but in reality, as we've seen with Kojima Productions in general, this entire studio is growing, it's expanding, there's a lot of people getting hired, and they're obviously doing more than one thing at a time, like expanding into TV, music, and film, right? And there's been a long, close relationship with Sony anyway, so I mean, is that really surprising? No. So for now at least, I mean, it seems par for the course, right? I mean, this is kind of what we're expecting out of him. They've got PS5 dev kits, they've got PS4 kits, we know they're working on something that's in all likelihood in some way going to ship, like he's going to ship another PlayStation game eventually, but we need to see what it is to really confidently say if there is or is not more continued partnerships, but I would venture a guess and say probably. Now, in a rather surprising, but also not surprising situation, if that makes sense, is that we got a new state of play for Hogwarts Legacy right after the previous state of play, which this one was only for Hogwarts Legacy, about 24 something minutes long. It was actually a pretty big deep dive into the gameplay and also the developers and what's going on in that game, but yeah, it was a little bit weird. We've never really seen a third-party game get its own dedicated state of play. That's the game's gonna be shipping everywhere, right? But it's also not surprising because Sony, we know, has marketing rights for this title, which in the grand scheme of things makes a lot of sense, because one of the dumbest things I ever said was when the first trailer for this game was showcased during the initial PS5 reveal event. I said something along the lines of like, who really cares about this, or like, do people really want this? And it's like, oh my god, yes, I really underestimated just how popular Harry Potter was. That first trailer has like 20 something million views on Sony's channel, and the reception for this game has been extremely positive, outside of obviously J.K. Rowling being awful, but outside of that, looking at this game, it's there's a lot of positive energy going into this one for sure. And I don't even really care about the Harry Potter universe, but watching that state of play, I'm like, wow, this game is loaded. There's a lot of things going on, and I kind of wish I did care about that world, because then I probably would have loved what I saw. But yeah, just judging it from an open world game point of view, it does seem very ambitious. There's a lot going on. So if it is received well, then no doubt this game is going to move millions of copies easy, and that really puts into perspective why Sony wanted to get close to this game to begin with, which presumably they signed it on, years ago, or at least a little over a year ago when they got some sort of vertical slice. No, more than maybe 2-something years ago when they got a vertical slice, and they thought they wanted dibs on it because they knew it would probably do very well for what is such a recognized IP. And especially when they're already coming out and saying this is a proper single-player open-world game, no MTX, no nothing like that, amongst all these live service games and things like that, right? You would think most publishers would get the idea that people want a genuine single-player experience in these well-known, recognizable IPs. So Sony must have picked up on that right away with this game in particular, and they probably signed it well before, J.K. Rowling went, haywire and crazy with her comments in the last year and a half, 2 years or so. And that's obviously a problem for people, and I'm with you. She's been categorically an awful human being every single chance she gets, so yeah, can't stand her either. And that's why it sucks, because she already got hers, right? She's loaded. She'll always benefit from this IP. There's really no getting around that. So make your decision on boycotting the game, or you shouldn't feel awful buying it or playing it either. But yeah, that's it's no surprise that Sony wanted to get close with this game in particular, and now we might have a baseline of knowing that with State of Plays moving forward. We now know that Sony may do a State of Play for just a normal third-party game that maybe, say, has at a minimum marketing rights. Next up, I think it's fair to say that it was always puzzling that this franchise or this game was not on PlayStation long ago, but that would be Roblox, and it looks like that might be changing soon based on a job listing that very directly calls out they're looking for somebody to work on the PlayStation version. So this job listing is for a senior software engineer, PlayStation console. It says, as the gaming console software engineer, you'll help build and support our engine used by millions of users worldwide for the Sony PlayStation platform. This was always surprising because Roblox is a cash cow. It's huge. It generates so much money, and as far as I know, there was never a reason as to why it wasn't on PlayStation, so it just seemed like more of a inevitability, I guess we could say. So better late than never, but it's finally coming. I know very little about Roblox, in all honesty, but I do know it's very big. It makes a lot of money. A lot of kids like it, and I guess it's finally going to be an option on PlayStation soon. Now, I am very excited about this one. My favorite PSVR game, Moss, which we know is getting a sequel, Moss Book 2, that just got a confirmed release date of March 31st, which is very soon, much sooner than I was expecting. And the only weird thing about this is that it's nice to see, a major PSVR game come out near the end of the headset's life, which we kind of know that's what's happening here. It's nice to have that, but also a bit bittersweet because, it is such a late life cycle game that in all likelihood it's going to see a native PSVR 2 port. I would be shocked otherwise if it didn't, and to be honest, because I'm not expecting, and I'm warning a lot of people, we're probably not going to have backwards compatibility for PSVR 2 with Gen 1 PSVR headsets. Just expect it. Because of that, many developers might likely offer, PSVR 2 ports, which those could be, free upgrades like we've seen for a lot of publishers, or possibly a small upgrade fee. But be that as it may, it's something where, because Moss 2 is launching so late, it seems more than likely this game is probably coming out on PSVR 2 natively at some point. And it's not like I want to recommend against it, but I'm probably going to wait because there's so much to play anyway right now. A PSVR game coming out March 31st, I'm like 3 games behind right now, and more is coming out. Strangers of Paradise launched today, and that's a game where I honestly want to jump in and play that too. Picked up Triangle Strategy and played a mission of that and didn't get very far. Still working on Horizon. There's so much that's dropping in such a short amount of time. Everyone's still playing Elden Ring, so I will probably wait for this one, assuming that it gets a native PSVR 2 port, which would not surprise me whatsoever. Moving on to our next story, we've got an update on that sexual harassment lawsuit filed back in November of 2021, where originally it was one person, but now, as of recent, 8 more women stepped forward to talk about their experiences working at SIE. And as of recent, reported by Axios, Sony actually finally acknowledged these criticisms where they said, and I quote, or at least the Sony's lawyers said, and I quote, "To be sure, SIE takes the substance of newly submitted declarations seriously. Although most are by former employees who no longer work at SIE, SIE either has addressed or will address the issues raised in them in due course, as SIE values its female employees and takes proactive steps to ensure they have every opportunity to thrive and be heard." Now, the problem with this statement is that they actually still want the original lawsuit thrown out. So basically they're saying, we hear these 8 new women, but that first one, yeah, it's still not true, or that didn't happen, and we want this thrown out. So that's still disappointing, but not really uncharacteristic of any, again, multi-billion-dollar company, right? And this is kind of what we get at when we say every company has these issues. It's not great. I would like to see them change and go away, or for them to, you know, really be as proactive as they say they are, but, you know, actions speak louder than words, and really it's hard for any sort of company to have this many people employed for these problems to not happen in the first place, right? It's just, it sucks that that's the way it is, but this is why this is one of the few stories where, for me, there's always a bit of pessimism surrounding it, or, you know, attached to it. So for now, that's our latest update. For our next story, one game coming out very soon, of course, is Tiny Tina's Wonderland on March 25th. And recently it was confirmed this game is going to have cross-play across PS4, 5, Xbox, PC, and you know, Gearbox's Randy Pitchford recently pointed this out on Twitter, directly calling out Sony, not calling them out per se, but he says, and I quote here, "Tiny Tina's Wonderland will ship on March 25th with full crossplay for all platforms at launch, including PlayStation. Incredible work from the engineers at Gearbox Software, with thanks to our partners at 2K Games and first parties, including Sony, for working together on this." Of course, it's noteworthy because he's mentioning Sony specifically here. We all know that for PlayStation, they have a cross-play clause type thing where they want to be paid a certain amount of money based on disproportionate playtime online versus what that player also spends on competing platforms. And so this is why some games don't actually have crossplay. We assume that the parity clause, or this, you know, crossplay clause, is still in full effect to some degree, right? The thing is, with Randy Pitchford, he actually mentioned a while ago with Borderlands 3 that you know, this game's not going to have it, right? And he was more or less saying, you know, that's Sony's problem. They weren't going to play ball. So it's nice to see that this game does have it. We obviously don't have full details on if they're just going ahead with the current agreement, or if Sony, say, you know, adjusted it in some way, or maybe even dropped it entirely. And I'm not, you know, I doubt that is the case, but still, it's good to see. And Randy, as we've seen over the years, has no chill, and so calling out PlayStation directly is not really a surprising thing from him. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. Follow the link down below. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and now announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories that I wanted to talk about you all from this past week, and our Tuesday video was an Ultimate PS3 buying guide, which I've been wanting to do this for a long time now. Not much happening currently, so figured we finally knocked that out. And yeah, the best consoles, controllers, games, all that stuff, right? Everything you need to know. And even if you have a PS3, still a lot of interesting things in there that I think are worth checking out. And then coming up, we're waiting on a lot of things still, like we said. PSVR 2, Spartacus, should be any day now. So until then, that's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.